Welcome, everyone. My name is Russell, and this is the Fallout from Dishonor podcast, where I provide you with wrestling news, reviews, and so much more. It is August 7th at about 10:30 at night, Pacific Standard Time, at the time of recording this. This past week, the wrestling world had no shortage of news at all. Between debates about wrestlers' contracts, all the releases that happened on Friday, there's plenty to get into. It seems only right that I start this podcast off by bringing up beautiful Bobby Eaton. Many of you probably don't know. I don't think I've brought this up on the podcast. Maybe I have, but the job that I work at, I work swing shift. So after I got off on Wednesday night, Thursday morning, at 12:30 a.m., I have been giving a friend rides back and forth to work for the past week because he has had some car trouble. I'm not going to get into that. That's not really important. When I got off work, I had about a half an hour, 45 minutes to wait for him to complete his shift so we could get the hell out of there. So when I got off, got in the car, pulled up to the employee entrance, put everything in park, shut it off, and got my phone out and just started messing around as you do, playing around on Facebook, opening up emails, opening up Instagram, and then opening up Twitter. And when I opened up Twitter, my feed had a few posts in the neighborhood of rest in peace, Bobby Eaton, I hope you find your wife wherever you are, that kind of thing. And at first, I kind of thought that it might be a joke or maybe some misinformation. We've had several wrestlers that supposedly, quote-unquote, died. I remember there was a rumor a long time ago that The Undertaker had died and that he's the dead man, but he's still very much alive. Eventually, my friend would get off work. I'd take him home. After dropping him off and coming home, I'd check my Twitter again, and the posts had multiplied. And at this point, it had kind of hit me that this was probably real. I went to sleep maybe 3 or 4 in the morning, woke up around noon like I normally do to start getting ready for work. And I got on Twitter and some wrestling news websites, and sure shit, Bobby Eaton has unfortunately passed away at the age of 62. There's been an outpour online that's actually been kind of refreshing, given the negativity that we have grown so accustomed to, especially on Twitter. This kind of stuff isn't that uncommon when someone dies. This is a little different, though. Many on Twitter and on news websites have brought up the fact that no one in wrestling has ever, on a shoot interview or a podcast or anything of that nature, no one has ever had a bad thing to say about Bobby Eaton. And this was on full display when this news broke and since then. I can't do a complete rundown of his career justice. If you want something like that, hopefully he doesn't mind if I say this, I would recommend checking out Jason Solomonster's podcast. At the time that this drops on Monday, his podcast would have dropped the day before on Sunday. I'm sure he's going to have a great read of Bobby Eaton's accomplishments and his career. If it's career stories you're after, then I would recommend the most recent episode of the Jim Cornette Experience. I believe it's dropped today, or it's supposed to. I haven't even checked into that. I've been so busy today prepping for the podcast. At the time of recording this, I haven't ran across a cause of death. That kind of thing can typically take a week or two to come out. With, obviously, the cooperation of the family, we'll get that news. If they don't want it to be public, then it's not going to be public. It is what it is. As far as I'm aware, Bobby Eaton didn't have any bad habits or anything like that, so I'm sure it was just health related, him getting old, the business taking a toll on him, that kind of thing. Now, what I can tell you with a degree of certainty, that what we do know, obviously, is that his wife, Bill Dundee's daughter, Donna Eaton, died on June 26th, earlier this year, and Bobby Eaton had actually suffered a bad fall towards the end of July, I believe it is, resulting in him having to go to an ER in Nashville, Tennessee. That's basically as much as we know so far. We don't know if him dying was a complication from this fall. It sounds like it definitely could have been. Maybe it was a health issue completely unrelated to that. Who knows? Hopefully, as more news comes out, we'll figure that out. As far as his career goes, I'm going to run through a little bit. Apart from the WWF, there really isn't any major companies he didn't at least have a cup of coffee in. He is, of course, mostly known for his involvement in the tag team, the Midnight Express, with his partners Dennis Condrey and or Stan Lane, depending on the time period. His championship accomplishments in terms of tag championships, from what I could find online, includes the International Wrestling Cartel tag titles, the NWA United States tag titles, the NWA WCW tag titles, the Mid-Atlantic tag titles, the AWA Southern tag titles, the NWA Mid-America tag titles, NWA six-man tag titles, Mid-South tag titles, NWA Bluegrass tag titles, NWA Rocky Top tag titles, NWA American. And that's just his tag team accomplishments. Not to be outdone, obviously his tag team work is what he's going to be mostly remembered for, but he had a somewhat impressive run of singles championships as well. Most notably would probably be the WCW TV Championship. However, he also held the NWA Georgia TV title, the MCA World Heavyweight title, and the NWA Mid-America Heavyweight title. I forget if it was the NWA Georgia TV title or the Mid-America Heavyweight title. I believe, according to Wikipedia, he had held one of them 10 times. So he's got a laundry list of singles acolytes as well. I'm sure in doing my research, I've missed a bunch of stuff. That's why I said, listen to the Jim Cornette Experience, listen to Jason Solomonster. They'll do much better recaps of that sort of thing than I can. The man has literally held pretty much every single tag title except the WWF tag titles that you can think of. The man even had brief appearances in ECW and TNA. All those companies he was involved with, and again, I have never seen a shoot interview or a Q&A session or listened to a podcast or anything of that nature where anyone who worked with him had anything negative to say about him. By all accounts, he was a pleasure both to work with and to know behind the scenes. I would encourage anyone not familiar with his work to seek out some of his old matches. Scaffold matches just aren't very good. You can look up any match involving the Midnight Express and the Rock and Roll Express. I would suggest looking up pretty much anything involving those two teams, and you're in for a treat. Moving on from that disappointing news. Next subject, Adam Cole. So the internet has been running amok with rumors this week. It would appear that Adam Cole's contract is coming up after SummerSlam. Normally I like to cite sources when it comes to this kind of thing, but I've ran across this a few different places taking credit for breaking this news. For what it's worth, the first site that I actually came across this was on WrestlingInc.com, broken by Raja Greer, I think is how you pronounce it. I might be butchering that. After that news broke initially, Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer on August 6th of this week reported AEW had offered Adam Cole a contract. However, later that same day, Tony Khan has basically immediately refuted that. That may or may not mean anything. Per Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful, Cole's contract actually initially expired in early July, and he signed an extension. I don't have an exact date sitting in front of me, but I believe it's literally within days of SummerSlam. This is certainly an interesting development given all the releases that have happened recently. Samoa Joe getting fired and rehired, Malachi Black having a 30-day non-compete when you're supposed to have a 90-day non-compete when you get called up to the main roster. Now apparently Adam Cole's contract possibly coming to a close very soon. As of Saturday night at about 11 o'clock, August 7th, I have not been made aware of him signing a new deal. It is important to bring up that this past Friday, supposedly, he was brought to Smackdown to have a discussion with Vince McMahon. I'm not really aware of the particulars about that as of this moment. We will see what happens. Personally, I would like to see him leave. He has done everything you could possibly do in NXT. There's not anything left for him to do there. Him getting called up to the main roster, best case scenario, he gets called up and gets lost in the shuffle. With his size, I don't see Vince McMahon seeing much in him. It just is what it is. WWE is the land of the giants. I know in more recent years, in the past 10, 15 years, we've seen the success of people like Daniel Bryan, CM Punk, Rey Mysterio, a lot of smaller guys. But make no mistake, it is still the land of the giants. Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar, Goldberg, those are just some of the names in recent memory. It just is what it is. Obviously, the AEW thing has been brought up. AEW can't just sign up every single ex-WWE guy there is. I could see him going to Ring of Honor or New Japan. Of course, as anyone who listens to this would know, I'm kind of biased when it comes to the Ring of Honor thing, but I would like to see him in either Ring of Honor or New Japan. Next news, WWE put out a statement on August 3rd saying that it has come to terms with the release of Ric Flair. Ric Flair put out a statement shortly after that, I believe within a day or two, maybe even the same day, saying that he had actually asked for his release, and he was granted it. There doesn't really appear to be much more to say than that. It's not the big controversy that maybe the Adam Cole thing will be, or the Bray Wyatt thing was last week. It's just Ric Flair asked for his release, and he was granted it. At least that's the way it appears on the surface. Moving on to the news that everyone's been talking about the last 24 hours, and the news that everyone will probably be talking about for the next few days. NXT and Performance Center releases. Bobby Fish, Bronson Reed, Jake Atlas, Ari Sterling, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, Kona Reeves, Leon Ruff, Stephen Smith, Tyler Rust, Zechariah Smith, Asher Hale, Desmond Troy, Giant Zanger, I'm fairly certain I'm butchering that last name, and Mercedes Martinez. All 13 of them have been released as of about halfway through Smackdown on Friday night. Really interesting. So as far as these names go, a few of them I'm super familiar with, some I'm slightly familiar with, a few I've never even heard. I don't know who Giant Xander is or Zachariah Smith. Of all these names, the two that probably surprised me the most were Bronson Reed and Mercedes Martinez. Guy's a former NXT North American champion. The guy was already really, really good in the ring, in my opinion, and basically had nowhere to go but up. He kind of fit the mold of a Vince McMahon guy. If he'd have made it to the main roster, he could have done great things. That one's probably the biggest head scratcher. So Mercedes Martinez is the second person that was kind of a surprise to me on this list. Now, I've got her wiki page pulled up. I know that they aren't super reliable when it comes to information, but the reason I've got it pulled up is her birthday, November 17th, 1980, which wiki has obviously her age at 40. She would be turning 41 this November. Obviously, she's a little later in her career. I don't know that if she would have been called up as a single, that she would have had several tag team championship reigns and singles women's championship reigns. But I believe this woman had a lot to offer, especially to up-and-coming women. She obviously has a lot of experience that she could offer. I just don't understand this. She was called up briefly with that horrible faction, Retribution, which I feel bad for pretty much anyone that had anything to do with that. I thought that thing was dead in the water the night that it debuted. A third name that was, I guess, a little bit of a head scratcher, Bobby Fish. Now, obviously he had a lot of success in Undisputed Era, rightfully so. The guy's a great wrestler. This is just a classic example of they have so many people. Obviously, just being a good hand isn't enough to keep you in the company. Bobby Fish, I don't remember being particularly bad on the mic, but I can't tell you of any Bobby Fish promos that absolutely blew me away. So nothing really memorable to talk about when it comes to him and stick work, which is very, very valuable when it comes to the WWE. So maybe that one shouldn't be as much of a surprise, but at the very least, he's a guy that you could use to get a good match out of someone. But again, even with all the releases that they have done in this past, 8-9 months, they're still so saturated with talent. I believe I did read on Twitter, I believe it was Sean Ross Sapp of Fightful that said to expect more releases, which is kind of scary. I think we've actually gotten that news pretty much every set of releases that we've gotten so far. So let's move on from all the depressing news of the releases and the Bobby Eaton stuff and move into just some good old wholesome wrestling. So starting out the wrestling reviews and comments and that sort of thing, AEW Homecoming was this past Wednesday night on TNT. It took place from Daly's place. Not the super hot crowd that we have grown accustomed to these past couple of months since both WWE and AEW have been back on the road in front of live fans. My guess is Daly's Place, those people there, they've been going to those events for a while. I'm sure a lot of people that were there have been people that have been going to these events for a while down there, so I'm sure the crowd was just burnt out. Moving on to the event itself, the very first match, Chris Jericho versus Juventud Guerrera. Now, let me start out by saying I was looking forward to this match. Obviously, there's a big nostalgia factor for me. I used to watch WCW back in the day, so obviously there's going to be a big nostalgia factor. I gotta say, this match wasn't bad per se, but the beginning was a tad sloppy. I actually thought Juventud looked pretty good through most of this match. If I'm being completely honest, and this comes from a person that has liked Chris Jericho for a long time, at least in the ring and on the mic. At times, I've loved his work. His stuff in WCW was classic annoying heel stuff. That first promo he cut on The Rock in the WWF was classic, apart from the weird face he made. I believe it was either towards the end or at the very end of the segment. That was a little weird. He's had great matches with The Rock, Triple H, HBK, Chris Benoit, and plenty of other legends. With all of that out of the way, Chris Jericho is at a point in his career where in order to have a great match, he needs someone who can lead him to that great match. And look, there's nothing wrong with that. Probably my all-time favorite wrestler is The Undertaker. And he definitely, the last few years of his career, had definitely gotten to that point. You could argue even way before that, some of his classic WrestleMania matches that he had with the two with Shawn Michaels, the CM Punk match, without those opponents possibly leading the match, having those matches as laid out as they supposedly were from what I'd read, they wouldn't be the all-time classics that they are. Again, there's no shame in that. All that said, this was not that classic match. Juventud, like I said, at times looked very good. Except maybe the last spot in the match, I didn't really think Jericho looked all that good in this match. It looked like he just kind of struggled to get through it. Obviously, he's getting older. I believe he's 50 years old. Definitely put on a little bit of weight since joining AEW. Again, nothing wrong with that. I'm not poking fun. It was what it was. There's not a ton to talk about as far as highlights. The end of the match, Juvi would end up in a lion tamer, and then Chris Jericho would hit a Judas effect, realizing shortly after that the match stipulation called for him to hit a top rope move. He would hit a top rope Judas effect and get the 1, 2, 3. After the match, Wardlow would attack Jericho, and we would find out, per MJF, that Wardlow is the next laborer for Chris Jericho, and the MJF is going to be at ringside when this happens to ensure this is, quote-unquote, called down the middle. Jim Ross apparently mistook this for him being a referee. That was kind of strange. A little side note about that. I know, side notes are kind of becoming my thing. But side note about JR. I love JR. He's been the voice of wrestling for decades now. If Gorilla Monsoon and Jesse Ventura were the voices of my childhood, then at least where WWE is concerned, then JR and the King were the voices of my teenage years, with some Paul Heyman sprinkled in there. as maybe with Chris Jericho, all things being fair, kind of pains me to say this. I'm a big JR fan. Maybe he should start thinking about winding it down a little bit as far as being a full-time active member of the AEW commentary team. It pains me to say that, but he's just been making a lot of mistakes lately, and it's really unfortunate. Next up, we had Dasha interviewing the Death Triangle, and basically in sort of a reverse of last week, Pac was not in the arena. Andrade and Chavo interrupted the interview, and based on kind of what I saw, I'm beginning to think that Death Triangle may end up in the Chavo camp with Andrade. That remains to be seen. It's just a feeling I've been getting. There's nothing really specific to point out in this segment. It was an Andrade segment. Chavo was decent on the mic, as always. I don't know. Since Andrade has debuted for AEW, I haven't been feeling it. I know he's capable of really good things in the ring, but just his presence, his promo ability or lack thereof. And look, I am a big ROH advocate, as anyone who's listened to this podcast would already tell you. And Bandito and Ray Horace are two really good examples. They'll cut promos, mostly in Spanish. Obviously, you get a lot of subtitles at the bottom of the screen. But the important thing is they still have passion and drive in their voice. Andrade, when the guy speaks English, sometimes you still can't understand him with the subtitles. So, I don't know. I'm not feeling Andrade. Hopefully, this alliance with Chavo and maybe getting together with the Lucha Bros will hopefully maybe help that. I don't know. I don't know if we need any more factions, but I guess in this case, if they were to turn on Pac, like I'm thinking they might, we're trading in one faction for another. So I guess that's not the worst thing in the world. And if everything comes to fruition that we've heard for the last few months and AEW does end up with trios titles, maybe Andrade and the Lucha Bros would be a good candidate for holding those belts first. Sorry about that tangent. Next up, Tony Schiavone interviewed the Dark Order. This was somewhat unspectacular. Number one, when we cut to this segment, I don't know what the hell happened, but the audio all of a sudden sounded like some guy from India from a call center had called me on the cell phone, and it sounds like he was talking through a tube. That's what I would compare the audio during this particular segment. It was weird. AEW has audio issues from time to time. It's been a few years, guys. I would think you would have this figured out by now. To sum this up, apart from the audio issues, basically Hangman Adam Page told the Dark Order that he didn't want their help anymore. Next up, we would have Jon Moxley, Eddie Kingston, and Darby Allin versus Daniel Garcia and 2.0. Not a lot that sticks out in my mind as far as this match goes. I can't remember which member of 2.0 it was, but basically the two things that stick out for me in this match were whatever member of 2.0 it was on the outside of the ring, talking to Sting, asking if he was the real Sting, and then Darby Allin kind of coming out of nowhere and laying in one of the hardest hitting dives I think I've ever seen in my life. That was insane. If AEW were to ever whittle down this company to where only one guy could do the high-flying stuff, with the way Darby Allin lays his shit in, it should be him. After that, Darby Allin would hit the coffin drop for the win. Every time he hits that move, I get a little scared. Maybe I'm in the minority. I think he should look into a different finishing move. A high-risk move like that is one thing. A high-risk move like that where you don't really see your opponent or where you're going. I know when he hit this one in particular, obviously he turned his head kind of in the same manner you would do to back up a car. But I don't know. I got bad feelings if he continues to use the coffin drop as his finisher. I'll probably get chastised a little bit for that online. Following match would be Christian Cage versus The Blade with the Bunny. This match would start on the outside of the ring with the true trading fists, and Christian would toss the Blade inside the ring. At this point, this is going to make me look bad. After Christian tossed the Blade inside of the ring, I got out my cell phone and got on Pro Wrestling Tees and proceeded to order Danhausen t-shirts for both me and my girlfriend. That, in a nutshell, sums up my interest in this match. I love Christian Cage. I think he's a great wrestler. I don't really care for the Butcher, the Blade, and the Bunny. I actually like the Bunny more when she was in Impact and the stuff she was doing with Rosemary. When I got done with my Pro Wrestling Tees order, the Blade was sticking his fingers in Christian's eye. An impressive power slam by the Blade would follow. The Blade would pick up Christian for a suplex, but instead of dropping him back, he dropped him on his stomach. The Blade would remove one of the turnbuckle pads and then turn around right into a spear, which would afford Cage the pinfall after that. Again, not a ton of interest in this match, but in my opinion, the right outcome at least. Britt Baker would be introduced by Tony Schiavone and come out with Reba. Britt would remind the crowd that she started her title reign in Daly's place. Red Velvet came out, and while threatening Britt, Miss Baker would remind her that she beat Red Velvet in 3 minutes. It may have been less than 3 minutes, actually. That's not important. Velvet bragged about the winning streak that she was on. Velvet bragged about her winning streak, and Breaker accepted her challenge. And so on August 15th, on Rampage, these women will do battle. This will happen in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is important to note because that is Britt Baker's hometown. AEW, even with the crowd reaction that she's been getting recently, they've still pretty much been booking Britt Baker as a heel. No matter what the situation is in Pittsburgh on Rampage, she is going to get a hero's welcome. Honestly, this might be the match where AEW might want to just think about turning her completely babyface. She's going to get that reaction anyway. So it's, in my opinion, it's definitely something, they shouldn't even think about it. They should just do it. She's already getting the hero's welcome wherever she goes, apart from maybe here in Daly's place. But again, like I mentioned earlier, I promise you 90% of this crowd is the same people that's been showing up for the other shows that they had done in Daly's place. Another Andrade and Chavo segment. Chavo brought out Fuego de Sol as a Shushan boy, apparently. And Andrade basically just proceeded to beat his ass. I was glad when this segment was over. The Andrade on AEW is starting to build up the same emotions that I used to get when I would see Baron Corbin on my TV. I just don't enjoy his work on the mic. Maybe it's unfair to compare him to Baron Corbin. When Andrade gets in the ring, it's much more entertaining. But as far as these backstage segments, they're not good in my opinion. Next up, we had Hangman Page in the ring with Tony Schiavone, and the Elite basically immediately interrupting the segment, which of course they did. One of these days, I'm actually going to go and look up online and see how many interview segments AEW has had where the person being interviewed didn't get interrupted at all throughout the segment. I have a funny feeling it's not very many. Back on track, back on the segment. After the Elite come out, Hangman tells the Elite that he has something he needs to clear up with them and has needed to for quite a while. The Elite get in the ring and Kenny Omega starts cutting a promo, calling out Adam Page for all of his recent failures, telling Hangman that he doesn't fit the bill for the Elite anymore, making it kind of sound like, Adam Page might have wanted back in. Kenny's promos are hit and miss, in my opinion. This portion of this segment wasn't bad. I thought it was fairly decent. The Elite, of course, would end up jumping Hangman, and the Dark Order would actually come out to help him, but Uno and Grayson would stop the Dark Order. As per the segment with the Dark Order and Hangman Page from earlier, he told them that he didn't want their help anymore. So that's what he got. Kenny Omega annoyingly egged on the rest of the Elite on the microphone as they beat Hangman Page down. Frankie Kazarian, the quote-unquote Elite killer, still not entirely sure what the hell that's supposed to mean. Obviously, he's hunting down the Elite. He hasn't killed any of them. I don't even think he's defeated any of them in recent memory. But Frankie Kazarian came down to try to save the day, but Frankie Kazarian came down and tried to save the day, but was overwhelmed by the Elite, just like Hangman Page. At the end of the segment, Omega basically ran over Hangman's face with the AEW World Championship. I thought that looked kind of cool. Next up, we had Miro versus Johnson Lee for the TNT Championship. I wonder if someday, maybe when they get switched over to TBS, if they're going to start calling this thing the TV title. I think they should. I suppose this wasn't all a squash match. Lee did get some offense in, but it was maybe only a step or two above that, in my opinion. Miro retained. That's basically all you need to know about this match. After that, Layla Hirsch defeated the Bunny in an NWA Women's Championship #1 contender match. After that, Layla Hirsch defeated the Bunny in an NWA Women's Championship #1 contender match. This match was definitely more competitive than the last one, but like a few matches in this particular episode of AEW, it had a little bit of a hard time holding my interest. Actually, what happened after the match was much more interesting, in my opinion, than the actual match. After Layla would defeat the Bunny, the NWA Women's Champion, Camille, would come out of the crowd into the ring, and they had, I guess, what you could call a stare down. To say there's a size discrepancy between these two is a hell of an understatement. Layla Hirsch was basically face to chest with the NWA Women's Champion. So that will be an interesting matchup. I don't recall on commentary where they said this match will take place. I'm not sure if it's going to take place in the... I'm not sure if it's going to take place at the NWA pay-per-view Empower, or if maybe it's going to take place at the next AEW pay-per-view. Conventional wisdom, I guess, would say that it would be the NWA pay-per-view. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe they did mention it. Again, a lot of these matches in this particular episode just had a hard time holding my interest. So if I missed some of the finer details, I apologize. Again, you guys can email the podcast, Fallout from Dishonor at yahoo.com, and go ahead and chastise me. I am trying to encourage audience involvement, so feel free. Next up, the main event, Malachi Black versus Cody Rhodes. This was the other match that I was looking forward to. This and the very beginning match. This match, in my opinion, was much better than the Chris Jericho versus Juventud Guerrera match. This was everything I thought it needed to be, and maybe even a little more. A lot of people have been comparing it to the Rhodes and Brody Lee match for the TNT Championship. It would have been about a year ago now. It was last summer. It wasn't quite the one-sided fight that match was, but Malachi definitely dominated this match. There was a little bit of back and forth at the beginning, but there definitely was a point where Malachi Black just started dominating him. The fact that Malachi Black won was not a big shock to me. I thought that was what needed to happen. The manner in which he won, with the black mass kick and then a simple foot on the chest, that was surprising. Say what you will about Cody Rhodes, but in some instances anyway, he doesn't seem to have a ton of problem putting over other people. I have noticed that he seems more willing to put them over when he's on his way out for a length of time. Did the same thing with Brody Lee. Took off for whatever it was, a month or two, and then came back and got the TNT Championship back. Obviously, there's no championship to regain here, so I don't know if this is going to be a one and done. What am I saying? This is not going to be a one and done, I don't believe, because after the match, Cody would start cutting a promo like he was going to retire. That my girlfriend was watching this with me, and even she was starting to get under the impression that he was going to retire. He started taking off the boots to leave in the ring, which is supposed to be symbolism that a wrestler's retiring. Malachi Black would then come back out and beat the hell out of him again. We've seen angles like this before where someone tries to retire and someone comes out and beats the hell out of him. It's usually either the beginning of a feud, actually. In this case, it would just be continuing the feud that's already going. I know Cody is supposed to be leaving to film some episodes of something else on. You'll have to forgive me, I haven't kept up with what it is that Cody's really been doing outside of the promotion. So that does it for AEW Dynamite Homecoming. Overall, the first match was okay. It wasn't anything special, and there was definitely spots that could have been a little bit more crisp. The main event was what it needed to be. The stuff in between, a lot of it, I just didn't really have a lot of interest in it. The Elite and Hangman Page stuff, I did enjoy for the most part. There was a few things in there that were a little awkward. That's not really uncommon for me with the Elite. I'm not really sure what the deal is with Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks. If we're being completely honest, I don't know if I brought this up last podcast or not, and if I did, I apologize. Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks just seemed a little less annoying in Ring of Honor and New Japan. Since they've gotten to, or since AEW has started up, particularly since they've turned heel, they've just kind of got this annoyance to their personality, and not in the way that I, want to see them get their ass kicked. It's maybe it'll get better. Kenny Omega has been very hit or miss with his promos since starting in AEW. The Young Bucks have been less hit than miss with their promos. Next up, WWE notes. Now, I do have a more lengthy review of Smackdown. Much like last week, I did not watch Raw and NXT in its entirety. I had NXT on last night while I was writing some of these notes for other things, the news segments at the beginning. The Raw stuff, I just went back on YouTube again and watched some highlight stuff. There wasn't a ton that interested me. There's not a lot to bring up, guys. We got a Goldberg promo on Bobby Lashley that, in my opinion, went far too long. WWE, to their credit, has figured out that Goldberg is best in the ring in a fairly short 3 to 5 minute match. If you're smashing him over, less than that, a minute or two. They have not figured out, however, that he does not need extensive promo time. It's not good. It's not interesting. In WCW, for a while, he didn't talk at all, and then eventually when he did, a lot of it was stuff like, who's next? I'm next. I know eventually they would end up giving him more mic time, and I didn't think it was all that great back then. I don't think it's all that great now. Maybe some of it can be blamed on the overly scripted nature of the WWE. I don't know. I just didn't think this segment between him and Bobby Lashley was very good. There was also a segment between Damian Priest and The Miz and Morrison. This made me feel bad for Damian Priest, if we're being completely honest. The dipstick thing, I think, is kind of stupid. The shirt that Morrison had, I believe it was at Money in the Bank, the America's Moist Wanted t-shirt, I thought that was pretty funny. It was either Money in the Bank or the Raw afterwards. I forget which. Priest ended up, I believe, knocking Morrison out of the ring and then cornered The Miz and shot him with the dipstick. It was sort of funny, I guess. So, next Raw related thing I wanted to talk about. The Raw Women's Championship picture. The Raw Women's title is probably, in recent memory, has been one of the more interesting things to me on that brand. That interest has kind of somewhat waned in the last few weeks. Now, I've brought this up in the past. Nikki Ash, like I said a few weeks ago, not big on this Nikki Ash stuff. The superhero character, I realized that, again, as I've mentioned in the past, she's supposedly the one that came to WWE with it, and she wanted to do it, and from what we've been reading online, Vince loved it. I just don't see this character having legs long term, and the way the character has been booked has not helped anything at all. Roll-ups and victories out of nowhere. The more they book this character to basically just get wins out of nowhere, in this particular scenario, the worse it ends up, just because her gimmick is almost a superhero. I mean, my God, that fucking promo she cut last week, where I don't have the verbiage in front of me, but something about how she was almost a superhero and she almost beat Charlotte, almost beat Charlotte. I don't fucking know. It was weird, and the verbiage was really fucking weird and confusing last week. that kind of stuff is not doing Nikki any favors. I know I kind of went off on a tangent. I apologize for that. Getting back on track a little bit. I know that we're getting the 3-way for the Raw Women's title at SummerSlam. Instead of booking Nikki up against people like Charlotte and having her get roll-up wins and stuff like that out of nowhere, I don't understand why they don't just book her against other people that are lower on the totem pole and have her get decisive wins over those people. All right, to go off on a side note, I know I'm getting kind of famous for these side notes. It could be a fucking segment in the show, 4 or 5 of them. Here's what I would have done. You had Money in the Bank. You had Nikki Ash get the briefcase. You had her cash in on Charlotte afterwards. At that point, the following week, instead of putting her in multiple matches with Charlotte, Charlotte should have come out and told Nikki that it was a fluke win. She cashed in the Money in the Bank briefcase. Multiple people have cashed in on her before. Charlotte has brought that up. I would have her bring that up just like she has, but then just trash Nikki verbally, telling her that it's a fluke. And once she gets a match, a one-on-one match with Nikki for the belt, Nikki is going to lose. In so many words. At that point, you have Nikki facing people that are not Charlotte and are not Rhea Ripley. Off the top of my head, I don't know who that would be. I don't have a list of the females on the Raw roster sitting in front of me. I know it's not very bloated, but there's got to be a few people that you could bring in with a little bit of name value and have put them in the ring with Nikki and just give her a win after 3 or 4 minutes and get Nikki actually built up to not have just these weird fluke roll-up wins. But again, I wouldn't have had her in the ring with Charlotte one-on-one these past weeks over and over and over again. This formula where they're just doing rematch after rematch after rematch is getting so old. And the way they booked the storyline has not helped that kind of stuff at all. My apologies for going off on a tangent there. I went completely off my notes and in the wrong direction. NXT notes. Much like Raw, there's not a ton that is interesting me about NXT. Now, unlike Raw, the stuff that NXT is doing that is interesting me is very interesting to me. There's really only 3 storylines that are interesting me from NXT. The Samoa Joe and Karrion Kross stuff, of course. The Cameron Grimes and LA Knight stuff, and then the stuff with the NXT Women's Championship between Raquel Gonzalez and Dakota Kai. So, start out with Dakota Kai. Dakota Kai had a very good promo video segment this past Tuesday where she basically talked about the fact that she felt overshadowed since Raquel won the Women's NXT Championship. She'd brought up the fact that they were tag champs and they lost it, and Raquel doesn't seem to have any interest in regaining those titles. It's all about Raquel, the Women's NXT title. One of the reasons this feud is so interesting to me, I'll admit, is that I was at NXT TakeOver Portland the night that Raquel Gonzalez debuted on NXT, and she attempted to push Tegan Nox through that table that did not break, and everyone in the ring collectively groaned, but not in a bad, oh, this sucks way, but in a very sympathetic, that looks like that hurt like hell way. I'm very invested in this storyline. I want to see where this goes. I actually want to see Dakota Kai end up with the championship. the promo that she cut, if you haven't watched it for whatever reason, if you're not a big NXT fan, at least go back and watch this promo. It was a very good package put together. The second thing that's been interesting me on NXT as of late is the Cameron Grimes and LA Knight story. So this past week, Cameron Grimes and LA Knight took on the grizzled young veterans. There's not a shitload to get into in this match. Basically what ended up happening is LA Knight bailed on Grimes when he could have used him. The grizzled young vets basically would end up dominating him. Grimes put up a good effort, but in the end, the grizzled young veterans would end up getting the win. Ted DiBiase came out and helped Grimes out of the ring and basically told him, look, I know you're a man of your word and you made this bet, but you can't keep doing this. So I'm really interested to see where that goes. The final storyline that I'm interested in as far as NXT goes, this whole Karrion Kross, Samoa Joe stuff. So this past week, the segment that I saw, Karrion Kross would be out and he was basically taunting Samoa Joe. He basically baited him into coming down into the ring. Samoa Joe had all these security guards around him who were trying to restrain him. While Joe was coming down the aisle and jumped in the ring, Karrion Kross bailed, which Joe was absolutely infuriated and started demolishing all of the security guards. In my opinion, this is how you book someone to start looking like a killer without actually having him touch the person that he's going to be facing at the upcoming event. Whoever the hell is writing Nikki Cross and Charlotte could take some notes. I realize the characters are a little bit different, the style of the characters, but you don't have to have them facing each other every week on TV to build up to a pay-per-view match where they're going to face each other again. Sorry, the Nikki Cross stuff is just really pissing me off. Anyway, I like the way this feud with Joe and Cross has been booked so far, and I want to see Joe get that one last title reign. I think that where this story is going, Cross will probably drop the title and probably head up to the main roster for increased pay and demotion in storyline and show quality. I feel bad for the guy. Maybe Cross will get a rematch before he leaves and we can maybe get a little bit more legs out of this feud so I don't have to feel bad for Cross quite as soon. We'll see. People have lost the NXT Championship before and then just immediately gotten called up, so I don't know if that's going to happen or not. With all of that, we move on to Smackdown. Now, Smackdown, much like my AEW Homecoming review, is going to be a bit more complete because I actually watched this show front to back. Smackdown opened up with Sasha Banks coming out, cutting a promo on the mic, saying that she basically wants her spot back and she wants her championship back. She showed a replay of what happened last week where she turned on Bianca Belair. I suppose you could call it that. I mean, is it really turning on someone when you were friends with them for less than 2 hours? I don't know if that qualifies as turning on someone, but Bianca Belair would come back and interrupt Sasha. Both of them would basically talk shit about how good they were. Zelina Vega would then take it upon herself to come and interrupt. A lot of people give AEW some shit about promos constantly getting interrupted, and they're probably more guilty of it than most of the other companies that I've watched, but this is a classic example that it's not just them. So Vega came out and brought up the fact that Bianca had more or less accepted her challenge last week, and then everything turned into a shit show. There was the tag team match. Sasha turned on Belair. It was confirmed in this segment we are getting Sasha versus Belair at SummerSlam, and it was confirmed that we would get Belair and Vega later. Then there was a segment backstage with Dominic and Ray, a typical WWE scripted backstage segment. Nothing of any real substance, in my opinion, was presented here. I feel the need to point out that when they went to their first commercial break after this, before the match started, we were 15 minutes in, and we still hadn't had a match. Now, maybe under normal circumstances, maybe if I was only watching the WWE product, that kind of thing really wouldn't stick out to me. But with doing AEW reviews, and especially doing Ring of Honor reviews, it sticks out like a sore thumb to me. I really wish, I don't know what it is with this WWE formula of constantly having to start out every single program that's not a pay-per-view, or I guess what you'd call a network special at this point. Not many people are buying the shows on pay-per-view. I don't know. I just like to see a WWE show that's not on Saturday or Sunday that starts out with an actual match. Back in the Ruthless Aggression era with Smackdown, it used to happen quite a bit. Maybe we can get back to that one of these days. It's the same show, even. Anyway, back from commercial, we get Dominic and Jey Uso. This match was what it was, and it did what it was supposed to do. It got the story moving along. I was a little surprised, actually. I kind of expect Dominic to win this, just because of all the 50-50 booking that WWE does, and I believe after they won the tag titles, Jimmy and Jay had gotten singles wins over both Mysterios, and then last week it was Dominic helping his dad defeat Jimmy. Yes. So I kind of expected the same thing here. That's obviously not what happened. Ray would end up leaping over the steps on the outside, I believe. No. Yeah, he leaped over the steps on the outside onto Jimmy to stop him from interfering. Dominic had this weird deer in the headlights look, and then turned around and lost the match, basically. Next up, we got a recap of what Seth Rollins did to Edge last week. Then we cut to Edge cutting a promo on Seth. And as usual with Edge, Roman, and Paul Heyman are the saving graces with this program when it comes to people on the mic. They're probably the only three that are usually constantly worth listening to. After that, Rick Boogs would play Nakamura to the ring. Love Nakamura. Still think this Rick Boogs stuff is kind of stupid. IC title contender match. Nakamura versus Apollo Crews. This was actually not terrible. I actually like this better than the Dominic and Uso match. That's not to say that there was really any more highlightable moments in this match. The end would see Apollo's handler pull Nakamura out of the ring, I believe, before he would get the pinfall, and then Rick Boogs would begin his shtick I'm not really sure. This match was okay. I liked this match a little better than the Dominic and Uso match. Not a lot better. Apollo's handler pulled Nakamura out of the ring while he was in the middle of pinning Apollo, and I believe struck him, maybe clotheslined him. I believe the referee called for the bell, and Rick Boogs began his shtick to kind of distract Apollo and his handler. His name's escaping me at the moment. Obviously, I said I like this match a little bit better than Dominic and Jay, but if we're being completely honest, I wasn't paying attention to either one a super ton. We got a backstage segment with Kayla Braxton, who was waiting outside of Roman Reigns' dressing room. Paul Heyman would, as usual, end up cutting a pretty good promo. He would refer to the Tampa Bay Bucks as the Schmuckameers for signing Tom Brady to another one-year contract, which got nuclear heat from the crowd that was there. Heyman, of course, would contend the legitimacy of the Cena versus Reigns thing at SummerSlam based on the way the contract was signed. After the break, we got Tegan Nox versus Tamina. Again, not much memorable about this match. I don't know what it was with wrestling this week. Apart from Ring of Honor, there was just a lot of matches on TV that were not a lot that stuck out. The end of the match, Shotzi would shoot a tank missile. It appeared that she might have been aiming at Tamina. It actually looked like she might have actually grazed Tegan Nox, but it did what it was supposed to. It provided the distraction for Tegan to get a roll up, and then the win. Michael Mole. Yes, Michael Mole. I wish he was a fucking mole. He could dig a hole and disappear and not ever dig one and come back. Michael Cole mentioned on commentary that Natty is only going to be out for a few weeks. I'll be interested to see if after that few weeks, what exactly happens, if she just comes back and cuts promos for a little while. As I brought up last week, she had an Instagram post where she had kind of alluded to the fact that she didn't think she was going to be out all that much. Now, to me, it feels like they are priming Shotzi and Tegan for a reign with the Women's Tag Team Championship. Even Natty's injury aside. So maybe they're just bringing her back in to drop the belts real fast, and then she'll go out. Maybe the injury isn't as severe as it appears. Again, in my mind, she had to have surgery. It seems like she should be out for a minimum of a month or two, I would think. So, speaking from personal experience, I had knee surgery. I had MRSA in my knee, and I was not able to walk properly for well over a month. So, having any type of ankle injury, we'll just have to wait and see what the hell ends up happening. Regardless, I'm not wishing ill will on Natty or anything. If she has a very quick and speedy recovery, that is great. If she can get back in the ring as fast as you can and do it healthy, that's what I'm for. I know WWE has a lot of protocols in place now where it would be a little bit different to just kind of fake your way back into the ring before you were ready, but it could still be done in theory, I would think. Next backstage segment, Vega would complain to Sonya Deville about the women's title picture. This would end up resulting in the stipulation that if Vega beat Bianca, that she would get a title match. I'm not really sure how that would work. Before we get into that, we'll talk about it later, maybe. Edge would come out, and then we went immediately to break after that, I believe. And then we came back, and Edge again was good on the mic. Seth showed up on the Titantron. This character, I feel the way about whatever the hell it is that Seth is doing with this character the same way I felt about the King Corbin shit. It's fairly annoying, actually. Edge kind of saved this. The Russell Brand televangelist Colonel Sanders comment I thought was fucking hilarious. It was definitely the most entertaining thing about the segment, and actually pretty spot on when you looked at the suit that he was wearing. Edge would basically, with that comment, goat Seth into a match at SummerSlam. While we're on the subject of Seth's character, the thing that probably bothers me most about this is at the end of the segment where Seth Rollins had that intensity where he said that he was going to face Edge. That little 10 or 15 seconds, however long it was, that little bit is proof that Seth has decent mic work and can actually cut a good promo. I saw him do it in ROH quite a bit. I'll admit in ROH, when he was a heel, he was a bit better on the mic than when he was a babyface. I don't think that's really been a lot different in WWE, except with the Monday Night Messiah character and whatever the hell you would call whatever the fuck they've got him doing here. I'm not a fan of it. I kind of want... I don't know what the hell I want out of this feud. I want Seth to not do whatever the fuck it is they've got him doing. Next up, Finn Balor is interviewed by Kayla Braxton. Balor was basically pissed at both Corbin and John Cena, and rightfully so. It's also very nice to see Balor not just letting this Cena thing go. Next up, Bobby Roode and Dolph Ziggler versus the Street Profits. In pretty much typical Friday night Smackdown, at least as far as this episode goes, I could not have cared less about this match. There was a time, side note again, maybe I need to start printing up t-shirts that just says side note on it. Side note, I love Bobby Roode. I loved Bobby Roode in TNA. I loved Bobby Roode in NXT, and then he got called up to the main roster. And it's not like I immediately hated what they were doing with him. It's just there's been this slow process of week after week he's been on TV, getting me to care a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less. And now we're to the point where I just don't care. Robert Roode and Dolph Ziggler are both very good athletes. The Street Profits are decent at what they do. There's nothing inherently wrong with anyone that was in this match. I just didn't care. This is actually probably the thing I cared about the absolute least on the show, and that's kind of saying something. Next up, Bianca Belair versus Selena Vega. Some decent back and forth to start this match. I actually have some notes a little bit, except for the end. So this actually kind of tells you that this was a little bit better than some of the other stuff. We got some decent back and forth at the beginning of the match. Sasha came out while Bianca had Vega in a press slam position on the outside of the ring. Vega would then take the chance to slip out of it and I believe run her into the steps, maybe just knock her down. There was a count out going on. I remember thinking if I were Vega that I would just roll into the ring, because I believe Vega got Bianca up and rolled her back in and got back in on a count of 9, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't remember her being told by Sonya Deville earlier that she had to win by pinfall or submission. Maybe I missed that. Anyway, Vega rolled her win and got a near fall. There was a few strange spots after this. Their chemistry between these two was just not great. Something seemed a little off. Bianca would run Vega into the barricade on the outside of the ring in this powerbomb-like position where she picks her up and just slams the side of her body into it. She would then put her in the ring and hit the KOD for the win. Roman Reigns appeared on the Titantron after this. Paul Heyman informs Reigns that Finn Balor and Baron Corbin is next, and apparently he's interested. If you watched, you'd understand that reference. Evidently, Baron Corbin is so poor he can't afford theme music anymore. I don't know how that works. It's a little illogical, but it's entertaining. He can't afford ring gear either, since he's wrestling in jeans and a dirty button-down shirt he's been wearing for weeks now. Corbin grabbed a mic before the match started, basically pleading with Finn Balor, saying that he was desperate last week and that he apologizes for what happened. Balor got on the mic and did not accept his apology. This was basically a squash match. After the match was over and Finn Balor would win with the coup de grace, Balor would cut a promo saying that he's not letting Cena steal his match. Reigns and Heyman would then come out. This was an odd spot to cut to commercial, but if I started counting the odd spots at which WWE would cut to commercial, I would have a large list. Back from the break, and Heyman grabs a mic and hands it to Reigns as they're in the ring at this point. Reigns tells Balor to keep his name out of his mouth. Reigns then tells Balor that he is proud of him for not letting the Cena thing go, but to keep his name out of his mouth. Reigns turned his back on Balor, and Balor shoved him out of the ring. Reigns didn't even fall. He just landed on his feet. Reigns turned around and very slowly started to make his way back into the ring. And while that was going on, the Usos jumped Balor. Reigns then started to bail, but Balor managed to fight the Usos off. Reigns came back to the ring and started squaring off with Balor. Balor would hit a sling blade, as Reigns was coming back in the ring. The Usos would then jump Balor again, and the triple team started. Reigns choked out Balor, and Roman Reigns and the Usos stood tall as we went off the air. Again, I had mentioned last week I don't really give letter grades. Between AEW and Smackdown, I would say that AEW had the better product this week. Smackdown had way too much stuff that I just did not care about. And if you're wondering why I don't watch Raw in its entirety, it's that most weeks SmackDown's better than Raw. So if I feel this way about a Smackdown, how the hell am I going to feel about Raw? Next up, ROH TV episode 516, I believe. Leading into this, Ian Riccaboni does the recap due to Quinn McKay having a match tonight. First match on the card is Quinn McKay versus Mandy Leon. I want to start out by saying I don't have the notes hold for hold, move for move. These notes are a little more in-depth than as far as the match itself goes. Not necessarily my opinion one way or the other, but the details of the match itself. That should be a reflection as to how much more I was into this episode of ROH as opposed to AEW or SmackDown or any of the YouTube clips that I watched for NXT or Raw. So, Quinn McKay versus Mandy Leon. To start off, Quinn McKay started off extremely aggressive, which I believe she did the same the last time her and Mandy Leon fought. She immediately, within the first 30 seconds or minute of the match, attempted to lock in the Tangerine Dream. For those that don't know, that's basically a $1 million dream, but she has, to lock it in fully, she's usually got her legs wrapped around the woman's waist. Mandy would reverse this and take control and take it to the floor. After it was taken to the floor, Quinn would fire back and send Mandy into the barricade, back into the ring, and some back and forth. Mandy would take control of the match and score a couple of near falls, but just can't seem to keep Quinn down. You could visibly see her getting frustrated at this point. Mandy Leon, though, still continued to dominate and hit what I would describe as a running unprettier, basically Christian's signature move, but they were in the corner and she ran out and delivered it to her. It was kind of cool. Quinn would try for the dream and eat a version of a stunner, and Leon would get a near fall, back and forth a bit more. Quinn McKay then would do what I can only describe as a crisscross roll-up for the 3. I'm not a big fan of just rolling up and getting the pin out of nowhere. The style of roll-up, you gotta watch this match and see the ending to know exactly to see exactly what I'm talking about. It was definitely a roll-up I don't know that I've seen. If I have seen it, it's been a while. In any event, I'm glad to finally see Quinn McKay win. Of course, Code of Honor was not adhered to with the way this feud has been going. I don't know how you could have expected anything beyond that. But this has been good long-term storytelling. This goes back weeks and weeks and weeks where, the Allure has beaten Quinn McKay time and time again. I've been cheering for Quinn McKay. I even went online and voted for her to get put in the tournament, to get put in this match, and I was really happy to finally see her win. So she moves on to the next round. All things being fair, I like Quinn McKay a lot. I'm not sure how far she's going to go in this tournament. The one thing that's cool about this women's championship tournament is at going through the bracket, the original names before all these first round matches, it wasn't super obvious to me who was going to end up coming out on top on this. I had a couple thoughts, Quinn McKay being one of them as the ultimate underdog that goes all the way. It might be more interesting for her to make it to the championship match and then come up short. We'll see. I need to take a look at the bracket, actually. I wonder if it's possible that Quinn and Angelina Love end up in the finals. I'll take a look at that. I do remember looking at the bracket. Angelina Love is going to end up fighting. Angelina Love is going to end up wrestling the winner of the Max the Impaler and Hollywood, I believe it was. So that should be interesting. I'm a big Max the Impaler fan. Anyway, got on a side note again. Maribel versus Trish Adora. Chelsea Green was on commentary for this. Although, all things being fair, she's okay on commentary. She's nothing special. I understand why they're doing it. When she debuted at Best in the World, they did it in a way where I kind of thought that she would actually be in the tournament. I misunderstood. It is what it is, but it sounds like she is maybe getting a championship match after all this is over. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. So this match, Maribel and Trish started by simply kind of feeling each other out. We got a tie-up. Maribel got a headlock in on Trish and rode that for quite a while. That led to an attempt at an old school Roman knuckle lock. An old school test of strength. Sorry. I'm getting tongue-tied a lot tonight. But Trish would break that up. Belle would have control for a big portion of this match from this point on. Trish would start to get a comeback a few times and just keep getting shut down. Trish would eventually start an extended comeback and start working over the left arm of Maribel. Trish would reverse a butterfly suplex into her cattle mutilation submission for the win. The only way, if you haven't seen this, if you don't watch ROH, I, number one, would recommend that you go back and you watch this episode because these two women's matches were very good. This hold in particular, so it's interesting that she would reverse the butterfly suplex right before this because the way I would describe this is some sort of weird butterfly suplex style submission on the mat. It's really difficult to describe what this looks like. Onto the last match, main event of the evening, we would get Violence Unlimited, represented by Brody King and Chris Dickinson versus ROH champion Bandito and Ray Horace. Starting out, Violence Unlimited basically just blasted both of their opponents right after the bell rang. They were very quick after the crazy breakdown and everything kind of actually falled into an actual tag match. Violence Unlimited was very quick to take Ray Horace and cut the ring on in half. That psychology, very old school tag team-ish. I really enjoyed it. ROH is really good at psychology in their matches and telling stories. For what it's worth, Brody King probably has the best looking and sounding chops of anyone who's not named Walter. Bandito would eventually get the hot tag and run rampant in the ring for a while. Brody King eventually shut him down and at one point applied a very, very long Boston Crab. I was actually convinced for a second that Bandito might tap out after Chris Dickinson came off the ropes and hit an elbow drop on Bandito while he was in the Boston Crab. After that, Chris Dickinson would put Ray Horace in, I believe it was some type of crossface. Bandito would eventually reach the ropes to break up the submission. Dickinson would tag in and hit a brainbuster for a near fall. At the end of the match, Ray Horace would end up holding Dickinson in place for Bandito to hit his 21 plex for the win. So after the match, it was over. Everything kind of broke down into chaos. The rest of Violence Unlimited, I believe, would come out. Roosh and his group would come out, and there was more chaos. Roosh hit Bandito with a poorly looking chair shot. I believe it was on the leg. I call every other company out for things when they look like shit. I have to call Ring of Honor out too. Number one, the chair that they were using looked like a fold-up patio chair, which I thought was kind of strange. But the chair shot just didn't really look good. It didn't connect at all. After that, things with Bandito and Roosh actually would head to the floor, and Roosh, in similar fashion that he would do at Best in the World, where he ripped half of Bandito's mask off, he would completely take Bandito's mask off and walk off with it. So that was the end of the most recent episode of ROH TV. Next week, we are getting the final round 1 match in the women's title tournament. Max the Impaler versus Holy Dead. I think I might have said Hollywood earlier. Whatever. Max the Impaler versus Holy Dead. And then we're getting something that's being billed as Champions versus All-Stars. I don't know exactly what this is. I'll have to do a little bit more research. Definitely the champion side, it looked like a bunch of the champions from Ring of Honor. I'd have to check the rankings. Maybe the All-Star side was a bunch of their number 1 contenders. All things being fair, I have just got back into watching Ring of Honor these last 4 or 5 months. I have watched Ring of Honor in the past, so maybe what I'm trying to get at is maybe this Champions versus All-Stars match is something they've done in the past. I don't know. It's not something I'm familiar with, but it looks interesting. I'm not a big fan of huge-ass multi-man tag team matches that are 4 or 5 people on 4 or 5 people. They usually break down into a mess. If someone can do them and not have them break down into complete chaos and a mess, it would be Ring of Honor. That will pretty much do it for this week for the podcast. I want to remind everyone, if you have show or segment recommendations, or you want to send in questions or comments, best place to do that is Fallout from Dishonor at yahoo.com. You can follow me on Twitter. Look up Fallout from Dishonor podcast. I'm also on Instagram, Fallout from Dishonor. And those would be the 3 best ways to engage in the podcast if that's what you want to do, which I encourage you to. My name, again, is Russell, and this is me signing off. Oh, one last thing. So last week, I had mentioned that there was talk about the retro wrestling segment that I was doing, and I had decided to break that down into its own little mini episode, which I'm going to be dropping. I believe I said I was going to drop the first episode. I have it recorded. I need to finish editing it. I'm actually, over the next few days, probably going to get a few of those in the can, and I'm going to start a time drop. I'm going to be dropping those, I believe, probably every Wednesday. I haven't picked a time yet. If you want to go ahead and follow me on Twitter, I will update anyone who's interested about exactly when those are going to be dropping, an exact time. I'll figure that out in the next day or two after I finish editing the first episode. But again, that'll do it for this week on the Fallout from Dishonor podcast. I am Russell, and I am wishing you guys all a very good week, and I will talk at you next weekend.